Hi, I'm Louise Barron. I was married to Jim Barron, and I was just listening to FEDO's story, and he told the very first parts. This is the date today is August 31st, 30th, I'm sorry, and we're at the Midwest Skydiving Reunion. And I've just had the pleasure of sitting next to FEDO and listening to his interview, and I thought it would be a nice time to continue it on. I was married to Jim Barron, and we had been jumping many, many years when the opportunity to purchase Hinckley Parachute Center came up. Jim had probably 100 jumps. He already had his D license, but that's about all he had. But we had jumped with FEDO, and we had jumped with many of the other people. Jim had jumped at Hammond. He started out in Wisconsin because we had gone to a wedding, and a cousin of mine decided that they wanted, that he had been skydiving, and my husband wanted to learn to skydive, so he found out where it was, which was in Wisconsin. And he decided he wanted to do it, so he went up there. His first jump, I forgot who jumped him. We just met him.
John Sherman.
John Sherman took him on his first jump. Now, my husband was a fairly large man, not fat. He was in good shape, but he was a big boy.
Big Jim.
And he was known as the Bear. And his first jump got him hooked. He went out of the airplane static line, which how we all did, and he put his hands on the strut, and they instructed him to give a good solid push-off and arch. So he gave a good solid push-off. His backpack hit the top of the wing, or the bottom of the wing. His face smashed into the steps. He did a back loop, stabled out, landed. His face was bloody. He had a big grin on his face and said, "That's great. I got to do that again." So that's his first jump story. He did continue jumping, and after about 4 or 5 jumps, and he got into free fall, they told him that he should stop jumping because he was too big. There was no rigs for him at his size, and while he was jumping a T10, that he would never be able to do anything in the air. So he immediately bought his own rig and continued jumping. That's his basic first tale. Now, he had a family. He had a wife, me, and 4 children. And women and children didn't belong in drop zones. So, of course, we all went along. So we became a family of jumping people. He jumped out at Hammond for a number of years, and at 1972, Lou Yogg and Bob Aum came to him and asked him if he would be interested in purchasing the drop zone. So he asked me, and I said, whatever. And he says, we'll do it for like 5 years. I said, okay, fine. So we purchased the drop zone from them with all of its charming members, and we tried to, what would you do it? We tried to tame them, but that wasn't a possibility. Hinckley became a family drop zone. They were part of it, and we also had family people out there. Jim brought to the drop zone probably his knowledge and his desire. He had absolutely no experience. He didn't know how to fly a plane. He wasn't a rigger, and he only knew how to skydive. So as time progressed, he became a pilot. He took the first time he went to get his pilot license, he took the Twin Beach, and the FAA people wouldn't even let him fly the plane. They weren't going to give him a multi-rating before they were even going to give him a pilot's rating. So he had to go back and bring a Cessna over and fly the Cessna. And then he came back and brought the Twin Beach, and nobody still wanted to give him his rating. Finally, one guy drew the short straw, and he went up in the airplane, and come to find out, this guy loved Twin Beaches. And so Jim took off, and they started doing all kinds of fun things in the airplane, and then they came back, and that was his test flight for his multi-rating. So he had his multi-rating, then he became a rigger and a master rigger, so that he knew how to do all of those things. We ran the center, and our children were very much a part of it. I remember when my daughter would get in the back in the manifest area and be running the airplanes, and people would walk in and they'd be smiling and they'd say, who's manifesting? And everybody would say Teresa, and they'd go, oh, because she ran a tight ship, and she was pretty tough on them. But the kids manifested. My son, Ed, did a lot of the parachute packing. At one time, he packed over 150 rigs in a weekend. He earned a lot of money as a young man because I think we paid him $3 a rig. Everybody else was paid $5 a rig for packing student rigs. And he was just 12 years old at that time, maybe 13. He actually packed for many years. The first malfunction he packed was a rig he packed for his father, which of course brought a lot of suspicion. But that wasn't true. He really, it was what are you going to do, one of those things. Jim was on the first 8-way at Hinckley. He was with the 10-man team that went to Florida a number of times. He loved jumping. His life was jumping. We ran the center for 20 years. I can't think of a better career. Teresa went on to run a parachute center out of state, and she now still jumps.
Give
A little bit of
for the Teresa's drop zone.
She runs Skydive Oregon with her beau, Joe Weber, and she still jumps. Has been in many large star record events. She's jumped with 4-man teams. She's jumped with 8-man teams, as did Jim. I think that's probably the culmination of a little bit of my husband. I did get involved in skydiving. I did manage to make all of 40 jumps after continually working the drop zone. I never got past the point of student status. I did do free fall. I've had the distinction of having a malfunction and 2 reserve rides and breaking a leg. So I think I've done pretty much what you need to do in skydiving. But I also am a seamstress, and at the time that Jim was jumping in 8-man stars and 10-man stars and fast stars with a thing, Jim, being as big as he was, needed always to be the base. And at that time, skydiving clothing consisted of olive drab parachutes and black work coveralls, and they were just starting to come into colors, and they were getting very bold with blue and a little bit of white. When and you ordered jumpsuits, they were custom made, and so my husband had ordered his jumpsuit, and it wasn't coming, and it wasn't coming, and he was getting very, very annoyed. It was several months, and so I said to him one evening, I said, I know exactly what's going to work. I says, I'll make you a jumpsuit, and yours will come. So we went out, and I picked up a huge red polka dot with white base behind it. It was huge polka dots. And I said, we're going to make a jumpsuit out of this. And so I sewed this jumpsuit together, and he loved it. So he said, I'm taking it out to jump it. And I said, no, you're not. He said, yes, I'm going to jump this. So he took it out, and upon his first jump, everybody came down and was just totally beside themselves, because the second they went out of the airplane, they had this huge polka dot target that they could find immediately.
Yeah.
And they knew exactly where the base was. Jim was a very, very solid base. I saw many times muscle people in position, and everybody knew exactly where he was at all times. So the jumpsuit became a significant trademark of his. And of course, once you make one of those things, then somebody else wants you to make another one. And I was begged and finally said okay, but we decided to make them a little less gaudy. So I picked up a fabric called Sunbrella, which was at that time a very new invention made of polyester. It was used for awnings, and the fabric was impervious to everything. It was fairly wind resistant, it was waterproof, and the colors didn't fade. So I thought that would be an excellent product to make jumpsuits out of. And we proceeded to make jumpsuits. So the Louise Barron jumpsuit was a pretty popular suit for many, many years. We made them custom. I would put decorative edges on them. I would do all kinds of beautiful things for him. We made him in all the great colors of red, blues, royal, whites, all the different beautiful colors. I started adding beautiful decorative trims onto him. Just for the fun of it, one of my best stories about the Blue Baron jumpsuits is a gentleman named Dave Torres who ordered the jumpsuit. Now, Dave was a Mexican cop, and you know how Mexicans love dingo balls in their cars. So I made these beautiful points on the arms and the sleeves, and I trimmed them in dingo balls. And Dave would go out of the airplane, and people would swoop him and snatch a dingo ball off his jumpsuit. They loved it. Finally, all the dingo balls were gone, so it was no more being able to get any more of Dave's dingo ball jumpsuits. But it was a fun thing, and everybody enjoyed it. We stopped jumping in '92. But Jim never lost his love for the airport. We miss it.